Hello and welcome to the Tesla Motors Club podcast. My name is Seb.
I'm Doug.
And I'm Lewis.
On today's episode, there can be only one, the Model 3 Highlander. We're going to talk about Land of the Giants. I know. We're going to talk about Land of the Giants. We're going to give you our thoughts on the Verge podcast. And we're going to talk about Doug's road trip across the country featuring rockets. Episode 50 starts now. Gentlemen, good to see you. How's it going?
What's up?
It's going all right.
It's going. You know, I had a feeling there was a reason that we found each other because I have not met anybody that knew the movie Highlander in a long time. So everybody tuned in. I apologize for the really bad joke. But obviously, we're excited. We're a week late, but the Model 3 Highland was finally revealed, at least in Europe, not in the US yet. So I figured we could jump right in and kind of get your guys' thoughts on how you like it, what it looks like.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty. It looks pretty interesting. So we have to go to the German the German Tesla site because it's not yet available in the U.S. and I don't know when it's gonna be available in the U.S. But yeah, it looks like some real improvements here. I can't quite tell. It seems to me not too many of the body panels have changed, and at least the side hasn't changed so much. There are some changes to probably to the hood a little bit, given the different profile and on the quarter panels, given the different profile of the headlights and the tail lights. But I guess there are just a lot of little details. Maybe Lewis has some opinions there.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall it's a good improvement. I mean, it's a refresh. They generally you hope that they make things better. Some folks will be happy, some folks won't. It's kind of a step in the direction towards almost like the refreshed Model S and X. So a lot of the little embellishments, seem they're probably the bigger screen, and they're kind of went over to more like capacitive touch buttons and things like that, I'm pretty sure. And they got rid of the stalks, right? So now it's the steering wheel. They're not doing a yoke, but the steering wheel is going to be similar to the steering wheel available for the refreshed S and X, which is probably the biggest contention that a lot of people will probably have with upgrading. But a lot of nice minor tweaks that I think overall are good.
Yeah, we heard from Mike isn't with us on the episode today, but he was planning on getting that new Model 3 when it becomes available, and his wife vetoed it on the fact that there weren't stalks. Yeah. But I bet you there'll be a third party CAN bus based
there's a mod already available for I saw somebody did that for the Model S Plaid where they put stocks back in. So it's definitely, I expect third party options for that.
And Mike's the kind of guy that would do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty cool. There's, overall, like we got a bunch of new specs. So the back seat has an 8-inch touchscreen now, which does entertainment and temperature control. Similar to Model S and X. I think that might actually be a little bit bigger than the screen on the Model S. I honestly don't remember what the size is in my car, but 8-inch sounds reasonable. When you look at it in the picture, it looks pretty big. They increased the speakers. There used to be 14 speakers. Now there are 17 speakers. And for the all-wheel drive version, there's 2 subwoofers and 2 amps compared to single amp. Which is what the rear wheel drive version has. They updated some of the external styling, blind spot indicators now. Huge, the range increase. So I'm curious to see what the options are going to be for ranges, if it's going to be multiple options or not.
Yeah, my sense is that the range stuff is unchanged. There's not like a different battery or anything. What's affected the range is that with the different styling, there's slightly less, slightly smaller
Drag.
coefficient of drag, right? So they, at least in Europe, they're claiming a 5% increase in range without changing the battery capacity. So I would expect something similar. Of course, we have different, like the EPA cycle, whatever they use to test range, is less forgiving than the European cycle they use. So, I don't know. I don't know that 5% is, that's gonna make or break it for a lot of people. I think I do like that. Everything is just a little bit better. To me, the biggest things would be the acoustic changes. We'll talk about it a little later, but I'm on a road trip here, and just kind of the noise, the road noise. What they've done is they've added this sort of thicker glass that is acoustic glass all over the car, right? Not just the doors, but the roof and the windshield, and so that's a big thing. Also, it seems like they've added more kind of soft materials in the interior, more sort of sound absorbing type materials as opposed to harder sort of plastic materials that will make things more echoey. They're things that are a bit more sound absorbing. So to me, that's a major sort of creature comfort in terms of making it more enjoyable to drive. I like the stalks, but I can probably do without them. And it seems a little bit better than the Model S steering wheel seems to be completely flat, right, in terms of the touch display. But it looks like it looks like they still have the rolling sort of wheels that the Model 3 has, right? So they have sort of more. It seems like they actually have just more control on the steering wheel. Whereas, as it is right now, we just have these little ball sort of rolly things. It's like they have those, but they added these touch buttons, which they had to do if they deleted the stalks, right? They had to add the buttons for the turn signal and whatnot.
It's definitely a different wheel. In the CarWow review that came out on the day it launched, he was saying that the buttons feel different than the S and X. So they're not just capacitive, but it's almost like a little clicky. I think the way that Porsche implemented it. So that should be an improvement. Overall, I like the shape of the wheel. This may be like a really minor point that might not matter to a lot of people, but I don't like that the non-yoke wheel in the S and X, it just looks weird, like round. I don't like it. If you scroll down, I saw it on the Tesla website, you can see a really nice high-res image of the steering wheel. Looks great. It's got a horn in the middle, which I know.
Horn in the mirror, right? Which seems obvious, but hey, it should be there.
It's got the D shape again. I like it. I think it looks really good.
Yeah. They also have the perforated seats. I'm sure Lewis enjoys his. That's the one thing that I'm really missing. I'm driving around here in Texas with triple-digit weather outside, and the AC keeps things pretty nice. But when you're sitting in that seat and there's no air, there's no breathing between your back and the seat, it's you sort of move around to sort of air things out back there. It'd be nice if we had perforated seats.
Yeah, that'll be nice. What do you guys make of the fact that the performance version has not been announced? Are we feeling that there might be some additional changes?
Maybe. I don't know. All the changes that they've made here have been non-sort of drive change related. They've been, creature comforts and cosmetic type things. So I don't know. This is supposed to be their lowest end vehicle right now, right? We could talk about it a little bit later, but there has been some rumors about a smaller vehicle, coming out of the excerpts from the Isaacson book. But I wouldn't expect that the Performance 3. I do expect there to be a Performance 3, but I don't know that it will be anything particularly new about it. I'd say to me that the the big thing that's kind of was hinted at and is missing here was in some earlier images, there was a sense that there was a little camera here, a nose camera. And since it seems that has disappeared, and in all these sort of physical examples of the car that have shown up in Europe, there is no front camera. And so it starts to feel more like this, you know, what we've been calling hardware 3.5. It's not really hardware 4 yet. And, you know, that's hoping that hardware 4 has a nose camera.
Opium.
Yeah. So I don't know. They just might not be ready for it. It might show up later. I think it's something you really need on the Cybertruck, if not for autopilot, just for driving the thing as you're pulling into a parking lot or whatever. You want to make sure you don't smash the nose into something. It's nice to have a camera right there, especially if these vehicles also have the deleted. I'm talking about the Model 3 here, but they also don't have ultrasonic sensors. So as you're pulling in, like right at the nose, you want to know what's there. I don't trust the camera behind the rear view mirror to let you know what's going on with the nose. So that's something we got to wonder, and maybe that'll become available when it comes to the US. I'm not sure.
Was that going to be for the 360-degree view as well, that front camera in the bumper?
It certainly could facilitate that. Tesla could do something like that now. It wouldn't be great, but just apply some kind of mapping to create a 360 view, but they're just not doing it yet. So, it's not that big of a deal feature, but it's like a feature everybody else has. So it's like, why not do it?
Mm-hmm. You guys seeing that comment from Paul? He was saying that the manual for the Model 3 has apparently a version with wider tires in the wheel. So that could certainly be a different spec for the performance version, right? I do wonder, and this is obviously pure speculation, but I do wonder if the performance version might have some flared fenders or, different spoiler in the back of the vehicle. I think it'd be cool if it had something that distinguishes it as the performance version.
You mean a little P on the back isn't enough for you anymore?
Little carbon.
You meant the letter P? Okay. So you had me confused for a while. You know what? Given how many Model 3s they sell compared to the Model S, I wonder if they won't. Like, I just had a thought. I'm thinking about all the sort of souped up Honda Civics and stuff like that. So there definitely is a market for the, I don't know, however you want the sporty lower end car. It's like the lower end car that's pushed up to be, something. And I think, like as it is, the Model 3 Performance is a great car and a great deal, really, right? Mm-hmm. For the cost. So yeah, maybe they'll do something new or different for it. I don't think they'll do anything that really means, like, I don't think you'll see fender flares or anything like that, because I don't think they care to spend the time on making new body panels, like the stamping of the panels. I feel like even this update, they've minimized those kind of changes. I
agree.
So
there's always aftermarket as well. So like, mm-hmm. It's not like those things aren't available. It's just Tesla themselves is not going to provide it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lots of like small enhancements though in the interior, right? It's got that LED strip now running around. It's got a dual air zone, I think, for the front vents, right, where you can turn off the passenger side.
That's been promised for a long time, actually. So
I was just impressed by the long list of changes. I wasn't expecting it to be that different, to be honest. But I think it looks great. It looks like a mini S now.
I was noticing the fact, like when you're driving, it really is a black at night. Say it really is a black hole in front of you with the 3. I mean, there is nothing in front of you, and it's really dark back there. Like you don't have a sense where's the where is the dash there. So and the the sort of these sort of light, I don't know, some kind of wire. It's an aftermarket thing with these little light pipes that people put these LED strip things, which seems fairly popular. So yeah, I guess Tesla took the hint and let's go ahead and integrate that kind of stuff for accents. I mean, that's something that Tesla has typically been not up with in terms of the rest of the industry, in terms of the quality of the interior, in terms of interior features. It's just a very Spartan interior, which I'm okay with, but there are things that, you know, there are creature comforts and things that people like to have. And some better interior lighting, I think, is a reasonable upgrade. So.
Did the old 3 have the interior lights on the door handles like the S does, or is it pitch black in there?
There are lights in there is a little light in the door pocket, and the buttons are lit. Thinking off, I can't really. There's some kind of lighting on the door, but it's pretty minimal.
Louis,
certainly
were you going
not
to say
accent
something?
lighting.
I'm just, I'm thinking about this whole thing. Like, I'm wondering, what the price point, like, if it really makes sense to even have the performance. Because honestly, like, it's obvious it's a good selling model. But I'm just thinking about it, like, they keep dropping the price of the S, right? Like, the Model S has dropped 40 grand this year alone in MSRP. It's kind of like, at what point is it the S versus the 3? So I don't know. I'm just wondering, like, I agree they'll probably do a performance, but I don't almost see what the point is with the pricing.
Yeah, I mean, some have speculated that that car might end. They're so few compared to the 3 and the Y, but it's supposed to be their flagship vehicle. But yeah, I don't know. Ultimately, what are the margins? Even if the margins are high, given how little comparatively the volume is, it might not be that worth it for them. And if they're dropping the price on it, that means they're trying to move it, trying to get people to buy the thing. And, Model 3 is pretty good. I mean, Model S is nice too, but to me, that's always been a way too big car.
Really?
Yeah, even to me, the 3 is kind of big. So, of course, I don't have a family, and I'm not trying to put kids in there. But you're talking to the guy that drove Miatas for 20 years. So,
yeah, I mean that is by comparison that's
a go-kart.
I know, exactly. That's a small car, but that's a nice car. I mean, the Miatas are nice. My wife really wants one. It's funny that you say that though, because when you're used to the S, I think going to a 3 would be a big change. So I guess it just depends on what you're used to, right? If you're driving an ICE car that's like a 5 Series or like Audi A4, A5, I don't know how that compares directly to the 3. It depends on what you're coming from.
I drove an A4, not my own, but a friend that didn't like to drive, so I drove her car around a lot. And the A4 feels similar to the 3 to me. The S is just huge. The S, when they designed the S, they were trying to put in everything, including the kitchen sink. I mean, they wanted it to be like, a 7-seater and all that sort of stuff, and have space for a large battery. So the S is kind of intentionally a big car. So I think I don't know what car to compare it to. Yeah, like a Mercedes CLS or something, some other big kind of luxury car. But yeah,
it definitely
like
felt big to me when I first got it, just because my previous cars, I had a Jeep Wrangler and then I had a 370Z. So it's just like, two-seater cars, much smaller. It's small compared, like, it doesn't feel big compared to an SUV, or a lot of SUVs that I've driven, but it's definitely big for a car. I agree there, but it doesn't feel too big. Like, I'm comfortable with it. I at no point am I like, oh, I'm taking up too much space. But yeah, The 3 is definitely probably a nicer size for most people. I'd agree.
Definitely for cities, I would agree, right? If you're in a big metropolitan area, I think it's a little easier to park, maybe squeeze into some parking spots. But I love the S. I think it's so easy to place and maneuver. And I guess one of the things we should talk about too. So now that the Highland is out, the Juniper, which is the sort of the next generation of the Y, that's also being rumored, right? So I guess we can assume it's going to have the same headlights, same taillights, couple other changes. But do you guys have any other thoughts on what that might bring to the Y? Pricing, demand changes, timeline? Not sure if you guys have thoughts.
I think it'll probably be pretty much exactly the same. It'll probably be all the same changes. I don't see why they would do it any differently. I can't really speak to pricing because they move the pricing around all the time based on whatever they're trying to achieve. In terms of timing, probably not till next year. They're already doing this, and the Cybertruck needs to happen. So I don't think the Y stuff will happen till next year. So, but I think it will happen next year. I don't think it will happen later than next year because the Y is the best-selling vehicle, and I don't think people seeing what's happened to the 3 they're going to be waiting on their Ys, and I don't think Tesla can afford to wait too long to make those updates there. So
yeah, I was wondering, why the Highland is released in Europe first, and it's like I feel like that's just because Cybertruck and just the other nonsense going on in the US, they don't have time to upgrade their production lines and to change things over yet. So they Germany was they're oh yeah, we can new production line, no problem, right there. they switched over pretty easily, but it's
and all the
kinda,
leaks were coming out of China, right?
Right.
So maybe part of it was because it's far away, and it's new. It's sort of new production capacity. So, because I feel like Europe, a lot of those cars were coming from China, right?
Right.
So yeah, I was thinking also it might have to do with the autopilot type stuff, because that isn't really a big deal or isn't really allowed to do much in Europe. And so, maybe they'll get stuff ironed out, and maybe when it does come to the US, it will happen. They want to do deliveries with the Cybertruck at some point this year, right? And I do expect they'll do at least a symbolic delivery of 100 or less this year. And I think part of that will have that if they manage to get Hardware 4 really going and have that front camera. So I would think when it does sell in the US, it will have that front camera. That's my
guess.
You're
still holding out. Still holding out for it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, mark Doug's words. We'll check back once it's actually out in the US. It is funny to me that when you reach out to Tesla via phone or chat, well, phone, you probably can't even get someone on the phone, but when you ask them via the chat, they basically deny that the Highland exists, which is interesting. It's probably just a training issue, and they haven't gotten the updated training to their team yet. But I did think that was kind of funny that, it's so obviously out there. And in the US, they're not acknowledging it, Lewis.
I think it's the opposite. I think they are specifically trained not to admit to it because they're worried about people, canceling their orders or delaying their orders right now. But you're right. It is kind of bizarre where it's just dude, I'm on your website. Here's a picture. And they're like, what are you talking about? That's not a thing. So I agree with you. It is definitely strange. But yeah, I don't know.
If you're in the market and you don't care too much about all these things, now's a good time, right, to get a Model 3, say. The pricing is reasonable. A Performance 3 right now should be pretty good, particularly if they have the newer cameras, at least, right? So, my car, it's starting to get longer in the tooth, 2018. I don't know that I would trade it out, though. I'm trying to get more towards not needing a car at all. So That's sort of the direction I'm going.
Oh,
So
please. We all know you're waiting for your Cybertruck to be delivered.
I have, no need or interest for the Cybertruck, though I will be excited to see it, though. So
Yeah. Well, before we move on to the Tesla podcast, the Verge podcast, Doug, did you want to add anything about the $25,000 Tesla car that's modeled after the Cybertruck?
well, I mean, I don't know. It's some information came out in an excerpt from the Isaacson Elon Musk biography that should be coming out soon-ish. I guess what was the story? The story had to do with Elon was all in on we need to design our robotaxi now, and it needs to be designed as a robotaxi. And Elon has a way of repeating. He has like a few sort of phrases, and he'll repeat them. And one that seemed to come up was the neither fish nor fowl analogy that he used for plug-in hybrids. Full EV or ICE, and if you get the hybrid, it doesn't do either as well. I don't feel like that's a reasonable analogy here for a robotaxi. I mean, it's like, what's the difference between a robotaxi car, like a one that's specifically designed to be a robotaxi car, and your normal car? Is what, like a deleted steering wheel? I mean, I don't see what.
I think they're going for utilitarian, right? Like they want it to be super clean or like easy to clean and like, just kind of like get it out, get it, use it, kind of beat up on it. You don't have to worry about. So basically it means like crappier interior, fewer features, and like cheaper to maintain. I think that's kind of their goal.
I guess, but all those things could be desirable in a more economy vehicle. So, yeah. Anyway, what it appears to have happened is Elon was saying was all in on this thing, and if FSD doesn't happen, it's my fault or something really dramatic. And the executive team managed to and supposedly this came out of Franz. They managed to convince him that we could do a smaller. More like a cheaper vehicle also. We could do both at the same time or design them in parallel or put them on the same platform. That kind of arguments of which Elon, who's stubborn, relented. And the words were that he wanted something that people would see, say, oh, that looks like the future or something, right? And Isaacson, is it Isaacson that said they kind of evokes the Cybertruck? I don't feel like that is a real. I doubt they look like the Cybertruck. It's just that they look futuristic. So anyway, we're all just sort of guessing based on third party quotes now. So what do we know? But it's obviously something Tesla should do, and it's something that should come out eventually. I say the same things over and over again. I would like them, whatever that platform is, make a ragtop version of that, and that is the Roadster I want. Right?
It's probably going to be like stainless steel, non-painted type, maybe the angular design, right? Like that's probably why they say it invokes the Cybertruck or the feeling of it, but. I mean, it's way too early to. I
don't know that that's what it will end up being. I think the design of the Cybertruck, while if you're freehand drawing it, it might seem like a much simpler thing to make, but I think in reality, it's probably not that simple to make. I think that there's a reason all the car designers don't already do that, and I think Tesla is probably learning that given the delays of the Cybertruck, and I kind of doubt that a static would happen in the smaller car. And honestly, I don't even see how they get around pedestrian safety standards with hard angles like that. So I kind of doubt it'll really. And even the stainless steel thing, that takes stuff to maintain for it to still look good. If you put some paint on it, it looks better. They're always like great ideas that seem like good in theory and then just don't pan out in practice. I think I remember at one point they're talking about the Model S would make it out of aluminum, and they'll just like the whole thing, like the whole paint would be electroplated or whatever, yeah, that didn't work. So anyway,
Isn't the S made of aluminum though?
yeah,
They
But
still
painted.
paint it though.
yeah, they still paint it like a normal paint shop. They're not just. I mean, obviously there is an electro sort of dip, for when the body in white or whatever, but yeah, they couldn't get away with that being the final coat. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, why don't we change gears and talk a little bit about the Verge and Vox Media collaboration on Land of the Giants, which we've teased a couple of weeks ago. We've told you guys to go out and listen to it. By now, the series has wrapped. And if you've never listened to Land of the Giants, it's Vox's Media's perspective on all things tech, Amazon, Meta. It's a really interesting sort of review of what's going on and the intersection of technology and people. And in the latest series, they've looked at Tesla. And so you guys have listened to it. I still haven't listened to the final episode, which Doug, I know you listened to on your road trip. But I mean, in general, I'd love to get your guys' thoughts. I wrote down a couple of notes as I was driving on the highway. I put autopilot on. I was in a traffic jam. I emailed myself a couple of notes just so that I don't forget. I think I threaded that needle pretty well just now. So
I thought you were going to say you used the voice to text.
Right, that's exactly what I did. Yes.
He had a water bottle on the steering.
He took a pencil from behind his ear and his notepad, and he held it up in front of his face as he wrote his notes down.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I have MCU1, so you can't really do any voice notes because it takes like 10 minutes for the voice to register. But so in general, I thought it was a good series. I think it's worth listening to. I had asked you guys 2 weeks ago who you thought that whole podcast was for. Because to me, there wasn't a lot of new information as someone who's an enthusiast, who's been kind of paying attention to Tesla's development since the mid 2000s. But I think there's a couple of things that stood out to me. So, Luis, I'll go to you first. Why don't you let me know your thoughts, and then I'll kind of share the couple of notes that I took while I was listening to it.
On, I guess, the whole series or specific?
Yeah, the whole series.
Okay.
What you thought?
So overall, I thought it was informative for folks that aren't, like you said, that aren't enthusiasts or aren't like Tesla nerds that kind of stay up to date on the latest whatever stuff is going on. The things I liked probably most about it was the history, right? Like I thought that was probably a lot of what was interesting, all the background. Again, if you read any of like the Elon books or other things before, you probably knew most of what was said in there anyway. But it was kind of interesting. So I thought those parts of it were good. Where I didn't agree or I kind of lost, I parted with views on with them was kind of when they started getting into like competition and like the FSD type stuff. I felt like they were, they did this whole thing where they were like, we're going to give points to Tesla's FSD versus, other, and I felt like the arbitrary way in which they graded it was like kind of nonsense. They didn't even really give Tesla a bad grade. Like if I remember correctly, it was almost like even, or it was like almost like Tesla slightly ahead or something like that. But it was, I don't know. The whole thing seemed kind of silly.
That
and
was the
arbitrary.
weakest episode.
Yeah, that was pretty. Ugh. But overall, I thought like it was interesting to listen to. I learned a few minor things that I hadn't heard before, and it was what I probably was most fascinating to me was seeing their take on it, right? Mm-hmm. Because they're kind of outside looking in. I mean, we're all outside looking in. None of us were working at Tesla, but we're a lot closer to it, I think, than just random media company that does other things. So it's kind of interesting to see their take and see their perspective.
Yeah, I agree. Good thoughts, Doug?
Yeah, well, I think I have my my phone here, so I think I'll just sort of go through the titles of the episodes here. So there are about 6 proper episodes, and I also think it's funny, like if it's not for the real Tesla nerds, then we basically shouldn't be suggesting it to our listeners, right? Because only real nerds are listening to us, right?
That's true.
I don't know that we have the general appeal, right? But I did find it worth listening to. So let's see. So the first episode was Electric Car Goes Mainstream, and that sort of was more the history of the car of the company, I guess. The second was how Tesla became the Elon Musk company, and to me that was the most interesting episode because it sort of talks about how Elon managed to get control of the company, and I essentially forced out the other founders, or the actual original founders. And I think that's worth discussing because I feel like the narrative, like there's been a lot of revisionist history on that. And what was interesting, particularly about it, is we've heard nothing from Martin Eberhard at all about it. And they actually managed to get a quote from him on this and talk to him a little bit. And he confirms what we suspected, which was back in 2008 or so when all this was going down. Basically, there was a lawsuit that essentially allowed Elon to call himself a founder. Like instead of the 2 original founders, which was Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning, he made a founding team of 5, which included them, added Elon, added JB, and Ian Wright, who's this New Zealand guy, and sort of swept them all in. So it kind of shows that, okay, they had to get to number 5 to get Elon in there, right? Just to make sure he could call himself a founder. And but what's interesting is, Elon has really badmouthed Martin over the years, the worst person I've ever worked with, and the biggest business mistake of his life. It just, that really sounds like hyperbole to me. But yeah, so what Martin confirmed was that when they had that lawsuit, part of it, of the settlement, was a non-disparagement agreement. And Martin, if you ever see interviews, he typically says basically nothing about it. But Elon has felt very free because, who's going to win when they go to court? Elon, one of the richest people, if not the richest person in the world. And so it's for that kind of thing, it's who's got more money. Even if Martin could win, he could go bankrupt and just trying to do the lawsuit. So anyway, I found that part interesting, and I thought, there are many different versions, but I thought what they presented was closer to the truth. And I'll say it again, regardless, Elon Musk is still the most important person in the history of the company of Tesla. Even if he didn't found it, he's the most important person, and probably would have died on the vine if it were just Martin and Mark, even though they still deserve some credit.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so the third episode is called Tesla versus the Competition. That's the worst episode in the series of 6. I would skip that episode even. They just do a really superficial, like, let's compare Tesla and other EVs available, and they bring up things like charging network and, I don't know, things like efficiency, and I forget what the other things were, but it was pretty useless. And, in my opinion, Tesla's still probably the best overall and would win just based on charging infrastructure alone. I'm on this long road trip, and I have not had to worry about it, charging at all. And if I were driving a Ford Mach-E, actually what recently came out in the news was I think the Secretary of Energy is doing a kind of an EV road trip and going around to different places for, it's mostly a political thing, but that I would not want to be doing that in any other vehicle. So let's see. So that was the third one. So the fourth this one was the one that I learned the most from. So the human cost of ultra hardcore was the title of that episode, and that really had to do with the labor stuff at Tesla. About there are lawsuits about sexual and racial discrimination happening at the Fremont plant. Racial epithets in the bathrooms. Some dude being called the N-word to his face. Some really egregious stuff. And they had interviews with the people directly involved, and I feel like that story has been a bit glossed over or sort of a bit suppressed, and I think that's worth knowing about. I mean, definitely, I've known several people that have worked at Tesla, and I found all that it kind of rang true in terms of having to work pretty hard. A roommate of mine used to work at Tesla, and there was a guy that was really good at designing motors, I think, and basically they wanted faster results out of him. And this is what my what my roommate told me. And he said that they basically came to him and said, work as if you had a gun to your head to get whatever done, right? Not everybody wants to work as if they have a gun to their head.
Well, that's probably why my door handles keep failing on my Model S, because that's how someone.
It's got to be done. This is just put it in, and yeah. So there definitely there's that kind of thing in terms of all that really matters is results, and motivate the workers to work really hard, very long hours, and there are other things. I've had other friends that worked at Tesla. There was a time when they literally decimated the company, like got rid of 1/10 of the company before before the end of a quarter to reach some financial milestone, and the people that were let go were the people that were getting paid the most. And then when the quarter changed, they were allowed to be rehired, but they couldn't be rehired in the same place, that had moved sort of horizontally, so that their benefits sort of reset, things like that. So they're definitely sort of shady practices. And one more thing in terms of attitude, for a time we did a conference, a yearly Tesla related conference. We called it TMC Connect. And a couple years sort of early, maybe for like 1 or 2 years, Tesla tried, or at least we tried to work with Tesla on this conference. And we had, the equivalent of their sort of PR. Actually, I think her title was customer retention. And one thing that our users had mentioned to us, or at least a subset of our users were interested in, like the women of Tesla or whatever, women that work at Tesla, that sort of thing. So we like at TMC, we have, obviously it's mostly dudes, but there are some women, and some women asked us, oh, could you make this part of the conference? And so when I made that suggestion to this woman that worked at Tesla, I was like, oh, some people are interested in women at Tesla. Could we get like some women engineers or something to do a talk? And the way she responded to me was like, that's not something that Elon is interested in. Essentially that's not something that the culture at Tesla as a whole is interested in. All we're interested in is what you can do and what your performance is. We don't care if you're a woman or whatever. Which makes perfect sense, but some people are interested in that, and just the way it was sort of shut down is that that's not something we're going to do. That sort of rang true to me.
Not to cut you off, but especially because at so many different events, even with the bot and all that stuff, they and Elon has said this, right? They have recruiting events to attract certain people. So by featuring the women at Tesla, you would think he would be able to appeal to a different demographic that's skilled and interested and get them to join Tesla, right? So that's a little interesting that was just a prevailing thought. I didn't realize.
Well, it was just interesting to me that the idea was shut down, but I think it was shut down based on her perception of Elon, right? And certainly at that time, the culture I got, just sort of the sense I got was a very cover your butt sort of culture. Basically, don't get Elon upset. And I've heard stories of just oh, Elon is coming. People hear Elon is coming, and they basically try to either try to hide or just don't run into him, because you might run into him and then he'll grill you, and next thing you know, you're fired. And you may be doing something really basic but important, and he doesn't find you interesting enough, and then you're out. So anyway, so I thought that was the most valuable episode in terms of learning something, and it's something that's kind of glossed over. Also, part of it was the company had to shut down during COVID, and how some people were during early days of COVID, people were worried and and don't necessarily know what's going on, but they were forced to come into work. And there's also a story about how there was like a pipe had broken or something, and people were basically still had to work even though they're like standing in water. And then there was another incident where there was a fire, and like the place like smelled of like smoke or whatever, and people were told to go back to work, and it's not necessarily a healthy environment to work on. So, but when you're just trying to make your quotas and trying to make your production numbers at all cost, or then something like that can happen. So anyway, there should just be a balance. Anyway, I found that to be an interesting episode. And just to round it out, the next episode is the self-driving experiment, which was obviously about autopilot and FSD, things that we've discussed before. And then the last episode was called the Global Race for EV Adoption. And I found that episode actually quite positive. It basically acknowledged that Tesla, without Tesla, we wouldn't be where we are today in terms of EV adoption. And even as the other competitors might be lagging, but they're still doing something. And so yeah, I found that episode to be quite pro Tesla. So overall, I thought it was worth a listen. But if you're short on time, I would listen to that second episode and that fourth episode the most, because I thought that was the most where someone who's already a Tesla fan could get something out of it.
Yeah. To add to what you said, I think the first episode, I would agree with you that was really interesting. And I didn't realize the link between Elon's experience at PayPal, right? How he kind of got shafted. And I think I've heard him say that the way that was portrayed is not how he remembers it. But I thought it was interesting that they almost staged this coup at PayPal where he went on vacation. I think it may have been after his wedding, right?
He went on his honeymoon, yeah.
Right. And he was gone for 2 weeks. And this guy probably never takes any time off, right? So he was gone out of the office. And then he came back and he was basically like stripped of his role, right? And Doug, you may remember that. Yep.
And Peter Thiel had his cronies in the board mostly. And then he come back and Peter Thiel's in charge and he isn't. So yeah, and he essentially did that to Martin, right?
Exactly. So that link was really interesting to listen to. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Elon learns, right? He's a smart guy, and so he took that lesson, and so then the whole Tesla board were his cronies, right?
Yep. Well, overall, I think we enjoyed the series. My only complaints, honestly, have to do with the fact how podcasts these days are produced. I don't know if you listen to the first generation of Serial, but I feel like it's changed every podcast that came after. Did you guys listen to Serial when it first came out, the story about Adnan? No?
I'm aware of it.
Okay. You'll still get what I'm trying to say, because in Serial, they were portraying really like interesting, controversial facts that made you kind of question if he was guilty or not guilty. So they would state a fact, and then this music would play, right? Ding, 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 like a theme. And I feel like lots of podcasts do this now, but there's not a big reveal. It's almost like an empty statement. So in Land of the Giants, I remember this one moment where they're like, we reached out to Tesla for comment, but there was no response. Yeah, because they don't have a PR department, right? So it's not this big dramatic like mic drop. So it could have been a little bit better research. There was a couple of things where it felt superficial, where I would hope that a media company spends a little bit more time probing into things. Same thing with FSD. I think they talked about autopilot as the cousin of FSD, where in reality, they could have spent a little bit of time that there was hardware one, right? This is like from 2014, basically in my car, 2015. And there's an evolution, and FSD beta is not really what autopilot started as, right? So just small stuff like that. And then the last thing I noticed also is they had a couple really interesting, knowledgeable
These
people
are your notes while you're on autopilot, right?
Okay. That's right. They had Marquez on. I think Marquez Brownlee had a comment, MKBHD. But then it also seemed like they were just like handing the mic to random people off the street and ask someone how much it would cost to charge your car at home. And some guy was like, I don't have a charger in my garage, but I heard it costs thousands of dollars. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. So it's just stuff like that. I felt like it misstated the experience of what it's like to own a car like that.
Yeah, I found it a little produced or slightly overproduced. There's kind of a narrator guy who has a sort of narrator type voice, and this is interesting, something happened. Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of that bit. But also, to be clear, a lot of it wasn't necessarily direct interviews. I think the stuff with Martin and a few other things were direct interviews. Some of it were just sound bites from other things that they used and were relevant to them. But you know, like did they talk to Marquez directly? I'm not sure.
I can't recall. I just remember him being featured for like 10, 20 seconds, just a sound bite. So I don't know if they got a comment from him, if it was taken from a video, but I did notice.
Yeah. Well, overall, I think it's positive. I think it probably educated, you know, the people that sort of need to hear these sort of things. I think it probably educated them some about Tesla, and overall, I think it was positive. And you know, given the way things are today, we're sort of seeing climate change happen as we're here, and so EVs are something
fake news. Sorry.
So I mean, but it's just one piece, right? It's pretty important.
All right. Well, I think that was a pretty in-depth review. So anybody on here who hasn't listened to it yet, it's definitely worth checking out. So Doug, one thing that was mentioned in the series is obviously supercharging, the charging network, Tesla's advantage in your favorite episode of the series, which we've just talked about, that was the one to skip. So let's talk about your road trip. Right, you're on your way, kind of cross country. You're spending some time in Texas. You checked out the Saturn V in Houston.
Hey, you're giving away all the good stuff. What are you?
Oh, okay. Sorry. Why don't you walk us through it, and then we'll talk a little bit about supercharging and what that does to the battery of the car.
Yeah. So I had I'm actually in the midst of it now. I had some reason to go to Texas, and I thought, well, why don't I drive if I have the time? Like, I'd need a car while being there, and rather than renting one. And also, I had some friends in Atlanta, and I realize you're in Atlanta too. So, but I haven't seen you yet. But so it's a nice excuse for me to stop in Atlanta. And so I left from Maryland, and it took me. I suppose I could have mapped all this out, but that's the thing about having the supercharging network. I didn't really need to plan this out too much. I just kind of sat in the car and put in the destination, and then let it tell me how long it would take to get there. And that's one suggestion I would have for Tesla, and what I would like to have like a mapping feature as part of the app, and I want to be able to kind of like Google Maps, but Google Maps won't really do this for me. Google Maps will tell me what the drive is, how long the drive will take, and I can say, well, if I left at this particular time, or I want to be there at this particular time, Google will tell me that, but it's not factoring in the supercharging. And so, I saw that, okay, for me to get to Atlanta was going to take 10 hours, but but actually getting in the car, it's going to be, something like 13 hours or something, right? Based on
Or 20 for me.
yeah. And it's times like that where I was like, oh yeah, I could use a little longer range. I have the mid-range Model 3, and but anyway, yeah, I went to Atlanta and I only spent a day there because then I realized that I needed to get to Austin, and the drive from Atlanta to Austin was longer than I wanted to do in one day. So I left early in the morning from Atlanta and I decided to stop in Shreveport. Not that I know that there's anything interesting in Shreveport, but I got there and spent the night there at a hotel, and then the next day came to visit Lewis in Austin. And so pretty easy drive. I tell you, one thing that happened to me though was, I went to Atlanta, I spent a day there, and when I left Atlanta, I left the car, like I was able to plug it in at my friend's house. And so the car is leaving with 95 or something percent charge. And I've seen this happen several times where I'll leave and then the car is telling me to stop at a relatively close supercharger. And to me, the whole point of me charging that high was that I should go to a further away supercharger and let the charge get, to 15% or something before it has to charge up again. And so I basically, as I'm leaving, I'm kind of fighting with the thing, just trying to see what superchargers are there and just trying to force it to go to a further supercharger. Now, it might have good reason. It might know that, oh, this is going to be the fastest way to do it, or the supercharger is closer to the highway or something. I don't really know. We don't get an insight in its reasoning. But yeah, I wasn't ready to stop in the next half hour. I wanted to get a good, 2 hours in before I stopped. So I'm fiddling with the screen, as I'm driving on FSD, and I see the road and that, but I'm looking at the screen and it gives me little warnings like, pay attention to the road. I am, but I'm trying to fix, this supercharger that you're making me go to. And then all of a sudden it gave me forced disengagement, and it said FSD no longer available. And I'm like, oh no. I mean, my heart sank. I'm like, oh no, I'm in the middle of this long drive. And the only reason it's so not stressful is because FSD is taking care of most of it. And I was actually kind of, I don't know. I felt like I went a little numb. That something similar to me happened to me before, and it's sort of unexpected. And I remember being kind of pissed. But this time I wasn't pissed. I was like, oh, because this was such a bigger thing. I was at a drive where I had maybe 2 more hours to drive. Here I'm in a drive where I got literally days of driving, at least another 24 hours of driving. And so yeah, so I was kind of worried. But it turns out it just defaulted back over to the old sort of navigate on autopilot. So it still has the lane keeping, and with navigate on autopilot, it will still give me the directions and stuff. So
does your car have the single stack version yet?
That's what. Well, it depends what you mean by single stack, but
they've merged highway and city driving, right?
Yeah. That was whatever version 11 point something, and version 12, which normal people don't have yet, is where the neural net does not just the perception but also the the actions. But yeah, it was just sort of navigate on autopilot, And one thing I really noticed was how bad it is. I mean, because you can just really see the difference in terms of just how it deals with things. And there's been really no progress on that, right? They just sort of stopped working on that as they worked on FSD beta, which started as city streets, right? It was the FSD beta was just working on sort of local non-highway roads. And when you got on the highway, it went to navigate on autopilot, and you could sort of tell that it made that transition because the visualization changed. In this case, I just had navigate on autopilot, and when I was on sort of normal sort of surface streets, it just did your standard lane keeping. So comparatively it sucks, but it's better than nothing. So and that's what I'm dealing with. And actually today I haven't checked, but today I should get it back. It said 1 week, and it was last Sunday where I got kicked out of the beta. So unfortunately, it's just a week as opposed to before where you had to wait for a full update. That's what, when it happened to me before, I don't even think I had autopilot for like a couple months or something until I had another update. So that was pretty annoying.
See, again, autopilot jail is only for the drive, and then you put it in park and you're back on the road.
Yeah. So that's it was for a time when you had FSD beta and you lost it, you had nothing. So that was a nice so anyway, we'll see how it works out. So I went to Austin, and then I went to Houston, and in Houston I made a point to go to Johnson Space Center, and I got to see Mission Control, and there's also, they've refurbished the historic Mission Control where the Apollo missions happened, and got to actually go on the floor there, so that was pretty cool. And they have a Saturn V there, as you mentioned, and it's amazing. What a big rocket, especially when you're on the business end of it. The F1 engines were so huge, and the
giant.
and the staging of the Saturn V is such that it kind of tapers. I mean, the very top of the thing is the sort of abort. It's like a tractor. There's like a rocket to pull the capsule away, so it's really narrow at the top. And as you get through the staging, like you get to the top stage where the command module was, and where the LEM, the lunar landing module was. But yeah, when you get to the bottom of that thing, man, it's fat, and you got these 5 huge engines. That's really something to see. And they also have a Falcon 9 booster that you can sort of walk up to and actually kind of touch. And you can see the Merlin engines are so tiny in comparison, right? Merlin engines are like maybe this wide, but they got 9 of them. And you can walk up and, see the grid fins and also the landing legs. And so that's cool. And it's covered with some soot. That particular booster did at least a couple cargo missions to the space station before they retired it. And so that's cool. And now I'm actually in Brownville, Texas, and I'm gonna, it was about a 6 or 7 hour drive from Houston, and I haven't yet, but later day I'll go down to Starbase and just to see it. Like, I don't know when there'll be another time that I'm in Texas with a car, and it's neat because right now Starship is stacked, and they're basically ready to do another that orbital launch test again once they finish with whatever the FAA wants out of them, because the last time, and we talked about it in the episode, how they basically blew up the
Destroyed
launch pad. Yeah, and to me the worst thing was the FTS, the flight termination system, did not work, and the thing just kept going. That's horrifying, because that could be a huge disaster. Oh, it did at least 5 somersaults before it finally fell apart. So anyway, the thing's stacked now. You can kind of just drive up there because the thing is just so out in the open, and just sort of see it. So that'll be interesting, and I'll do that, and I have some other things to do midweek, and I'll start heading back, and I'll go back to Atlanta, stay there for a few days, and perhaps pay you a visit.
I'll have steak on the table for you, my friend.
Now we're talking. I have to hold you to that. And yeah, so anyway, there's nothing really special about it. You just hop in the car and you go, get your snacks together. There's no, I mean, we've been doing TMC for a long time. And when people first got their roadsters, it was such a big deal to do a trip, because when you charge your car, it was an all-night thing. And it was a real adventure. In fact, Plug-in America discouraged people doing these I'm going to do a Tesla road trip. They didn't want people to do it because it basically showed the worst part of having an EV. And the worst part is, this is like the major weakness, was that charging is slow and that you're basically going to suffer. And there are several, there was some group that tried to do a thing with the Tesla, and they had a bunch of kids as their support team, and their kids were instead of charging the car, they were playing with it and doing donuts and stuff, and the car wasn't charged, and they had to fire their whole support team. And so anyway, a bunch of nightmare situations, and it was just a big deal, back then, less than about a decade ago or so, and now it's
how is your
nothing
Buc-ee's experience?
Buc-ee's is great. Buc-ee's is great. I normally like to have a big thing of tea, just for a bit of caffeine. I'm getting up early, and I didn't manage to do that, and I'm not really a coffee drinker. But they had the chocolate covered espresso beans, and and I enjoyed that, and the jerky, and I was able to get a brisket breakfast burrito. So yeah, Buc-ee's is something else. I've been to a couple Buc-ee's now. One was huge. One was basically a Walmart. You could get clothes and stuff there. And the one I was at more recently was more normal sized. It was just food.
I've never seen a small one. I thought I've only seen the really big ones where you can get clothes and everything. I didn't realize they had smaller ones. But the good news is they all have Tesla superchargers now. So
is that right? Every Buc-ee's has a supercharger?
As far as I know, most of them should, if not all. So I've been to, I think, 3 different Buc-ee's that all had superchargers. I went to a supercharger opening at one of them between Austin and San Antonio. But yeah, it was a big deal because Buc-ee's is known to be a place to go get gas and have really good convenience stores. And they're it's a place to go get gas and now to supercharge your Tesla. So
yeah, I find it really great. On the East Coast, I can't remember the name of the place now. I would drive between Maryland and Ithaca quite a bit, and most of the supercharger stops were at it starts with an S, something that relates to pizza. I think
Sparrows.
No, it's Slices or it's like a terrible name because it relates to pizza, but it sounds fecal. I can't remember what. Can't occur.
Maybe we should just move off of that one.
But anyway, it's basically a kind of a fast food. It's got a convenience store kind of thing, but they're just sort of terrible. Whereas Buc-ee's is pretty cool. So.
I think that pizza you were just thinking of, that's what they served on that recent Delta flight.
Oh man. So we should mention, because timing and stuff. We should mention about the supercharger study that came out, Doug, or I guess Seb. I don't know who wants to talk about it, but yeah.
Yeah, let's see. I have. Why don't you talk about it while I find?
Okay, I'll talk about it. Okay, so recent study came out on superchargers. There's been a lot of rumors for years and years about don't supercharge too much. If you do DC fast charging, you're gonna mess up your car, your battery life, yada yada, all that kind of stuff. Now there's actual some hard data on this topic, and what it shows is that's a bunch of BS. Yeah, it basically doesn't matter. So they had drivers, they had 6,300 vehicles, Model 3s specifically, where people that supercharged a lot, very often, and folks that almost never did DC fast charging. And yeah, the battery life basically is pretty much tied to the age of it and the miles and stuff, and not really how you charged it during its life. So that's kind of good news for folks that do want a road trip. You don't have to worry about supercharging killing your car's range. So,
Yeah, well, if I didn't read the study, but specifically the Model 3 or specifically Tesla, it's sort of a testament to their engineering. Because things that make batteries die, right? I mean, there's a calendar life and there's a cycle life, and things that can really eat into it is if the battery's like super hot,
temperature is a big one.
Temperature's a big
or
thing.
Cold, too cold or hot. Yeah.
Right. Well, so Tesla does a great job of maintaining the temperature of its battery. Even back to the Tesla Roadster, they were the only people that had a liquid cooled battery where there's antifreeze running along and exchanging heat with the battery. And the Nissan Leaf, the first generation of that, basically Nissan had to replace the batteries of a bunch of cars in Arizona because they died just being parked, right? Just sitting outside being parked. So yeah, I think that's what it says really. And we're putting a lot of energy through it, but you hear it gets loud, right? You hear those fans running, that they're doing what they need to do to keep the battery healthy. And the battery basically wants to be about room temperature. It wants to be around 20 degrees Celsius, and that's what they have a very interesting and well-engineered HVAC system that moves heat around in just the right ways to keep the battery and the motor and the occupant cool. So
it'll be interesting to see in a few years if we ever we get more data on Tesla's battery life based on this versus other competitors, because I agree with you, there's a lot that goes into the engineering and the manufacturing of the car, and the battery pack specifically, that and the battery management system that will impact this. So Tesla though is definitely doing extremely well with it. So
I think pretty much everybody is doing some kind of liquid cooling in terms of the battery temperature management now, right?
Right. They all basically copied Tesla, but there are some interesting alternatives of are they doing it on the which side of the cells are they doing it? On the ends. Are they doing it on around the cylinder? And is it little heat pipes, or is it all that kind of stuff? There's a lot of nuance into how they're specifically building the packs. And what type of coolant they're doing, and yada yada. But
that was another advantage of Tesla, because the other companies were using these sort of prismatic cells, as they call them, or these sort of pouch type cells, and Tesla, by having these these sort of cylindrical cells where they're essentially smaller, so you can pull the heat out of them better, as opposed to you have some pouch where how are you getting the heat out of the center of that big pouch?
Yep. It's actually one of the differences between the 4680 cells, right, versus the older ones, because the older ones are smaller.
Smaller, yeah.
So it's easier to get more heat out for the higher performance, which is one of the reasons they're not putting 4680s in the plaids. But anyway, yeah. So this was a really cool study. I thought it was neat, and kind of related to your road tripping, since you're doing a whole lot.
100%.
Doing a lot of supercharging. Yeah, this is true.
Good stuff. Great note to end on. I have one question that I want to see if Doug or Lewis, you guys can answer. It's from Paul in the chat, and he's actually asking about the battery capacity in the Model 3 Highland. So you guys can see it on the screen, but he has an 82 kilowatt hour battery in his 22 Model 3. I'm guessing that's the long range. There's really no specs yet officially on the battery in the new Highland. So do we know, is it 75 kilowatts? What is it?
So we haven't been able to tear one apart, so we don't know specifically what's in there. And they also do tricks sometimes where they'll put bigger batteries if you don't have full access or things like that. What I'll say is, to Doug's point, the drag coefficient of the new Highland design should only give about 5% improved performance. But it's possible they made other improvements in other places, because they're saying that the long range, if you do the math, basically comes out to 391 miles of range, which is more than 5% greater than what the older long range is. So I would say they either just other efficiencies as well, or it's maybe a slightly bigger pack or some kind of standard. I don't know. We don't know for sure, but it's probably not going to be much bigger. It's very unlikely that they have something like the 100 kilowatt or something like that. That's kind of more standard on the bigger cars. But yeah.
Well, thanks for answering that.
Once somebody gets one to a place that could rip it apart, we'll know definitively, right? That's basically what ends up happening for these. So hopefully soon.
Yeah. Well, also with the ratings, I do wonder how much you'll actually get out of it, right? Because if it's really mostly due to aerodynamics, but you drive quickly because you like, to zip around in your Tesla, I don't think you're going to see that range increase, right?
Right. But yeah, my Plaid's rated for 400. The way I drive, I would never claim that it's going to hit 300, even at a full charge. So, but yeah.
Yeah, and if you're on a trip like I am now, the charging speeds are really fast, right? The charging speeds are at, like 300 plus miles an hour, right? Miles of charge per hour. So it's, to act with efficiency, like in terms of time, you're better off going as fast as you can to get to that next supercharger, as opposed to trying to, which is something you used to have to do. When I talked about when you're on the Roadster, you really had to think about, slowing down and going like 60 miles an hour or slower, because the amount of lost range due to wind resistance, which goes as the velocity squared. That's like more hours of charging, right? Whereas since the charge rate is faster than you can shed miles, you're better off just driving quickly and getting to the next charger. So that's something to think about.
All right, lots of advice for everybody's next road trip. I would say that's a wrap. So thank you all for joining us today. If you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter, X, and YouTube. If you'd like to support the show, please consider becoming a supporting member. And you can, of course, join us on the Tesla Motors Club website. All right, guys, it was good to see you. Thanks to our producers, Adam and Danny, and we'll see you guys on the next one.